Barry was an unassuming man in his mid-40s, with hair in a ponytail and a slouched posture that came from years of lifting boxes and stacking shelves. He worked in the warehouse, a job he had held for nearly 3 decades. Every morning, Barry arrived at the warehouse just as the sun was peeking over the horizon. He would swipe his card at the entrance, trudge through the rows of pallets, and make his way to his station. Barry liked the solitude of the warehouse to the hustle and bustle of the retail floor. Barry's routine was predictable. He would check the inventory, restock the shelves, and occasionally take a break to sip from his thermos of lukewarm soup. But beneath his mundane exterior, Barry harbored a dark secret. For the past 6 months, he had been tampering with the medications. Barry had always been fascinated by the mechanics of things, but his fascination soon gave way to something more sinister. Barry began to wonder what would happen if he altered the contents. Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? His first experiment was with a bottle of ibuprofen. He replaced half the tablets with sugar pills he had crafted at home. The process was meticulous. Barry prided himself on his attention to detail. He resealed the bottle and placed it back on the shelf, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Days turned into weeks and nothing happened. No complaints, no recalls, no consequences. Emboldened by his success, Barry began to escalate his efforts. He tampered with cold medicine and even vitamin supplements. Each time he refined his techniques, becoming more adept at making his alterations undetectable. He justified his actions with a twisted logic. The placebo effect was real, wasn't it? People believed they were getting better, so in a way, he was helping them. But deep down, Barry knew what he was doing was wrong. As the months passed, Barry's tampering became more brazen. He began to swap out entire bottles, carefully replicating labels and packaging. He even started to experiment with the medications themselves, adding dyes to change their appearance. The thrill of deception consumed him, a dark addiction he couldn't shake. One day, Barry decided to add something far worse than he had ever used. He put some off-the-shelf rat poison into allergy relief tablets, and everything changed. Barry was restocking the shelves when he overheard a conversation between 2 co-workers. A young woman named Lisa was talking about her sister who was in the hospital. She has kidney failure and she's in a coma. All that was ever wrong with her were her allergies. The doctors said she had been poisoned. A sinister smile crept upon Barry's gaunt face as he thought, could it be? Might she have taken my allergy pills? He couldn't believe his ears. It was one thing to tamper with nameless, faceless products on a shelf, but to hear how what he had done might have caused a relatively healthy girl to become so sick. One day, one of Barry's co-workers fell to the floor and had blood coming from its nose. When he was at the hospital, the doctors discovered he had been poisoned. This was the 15th discovery of someone being poisoned in the town. It was all over the newspapers the next day. People in hazmat suits were checking the town's water, and local restaurants and diners were being investigated. But they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out what was making these people sick. Barry relished every moment of the chaos. He started to keep newspaper clippings in a scrapbook under his bed that were detailing the investigation. Barry was planning his most sinister act yet. He was trying to figure out how to put acid into mouthwash, but thankfully, fate had other plans. The police came and visited the manager of that Walmart, and they confiscated all the allergy pills as they wanted to test them. At the same time, a routine audit uncovered discrepancies in the pharmaceutical inventory. Bottles with mismatched contents, altered labels, and unusual tamper evidence were flagged. The company launched an investigation, and it wasn't long before the trail led to Barry. Confronted with the evidence, Barry simply smiled and said, "Yes, it was me. I did it." He confessed to everything. He showed no remorse. The police were called, and Barry was arrested. As he was led out of the warehouse in handcuffs, his co-workers looked on in shock and disbelief. Barry, the quiet, unassuming man who had been a fixture in the warehouse for so long, had betrayed their trust. In the end, Barry's actions led to a cascade of consequences. The company faced lawsuits, customers demanded answers, and the media descended on that branch, eager for a story. Barry was sentenced to prison, where he had plenty of time to reflect on his actions. He had started with a simple curiosity, a harmless experiment, but it had spiraled into something far darker. It was around 8 o'clock in the evening, and it was Christmas time. I had just received a holiday bonus from work. My dad, my 6-year-old daughter, and I were at Walmart. My dad, who used a cane due to his limited mobility, needed a scooter to get around. I handed him some money and asked him to take my daughter shopping for a gift for her teacher, while I finished up in the toy section. I specifically told them to avoid that area. The store was teeming with frantic holiday shoppers. As I browsed, I turned a corner and saw my dad and daughter playing with toys. Annoyed, I told them to leave immediately. Just then, I heard my name and turned to see an old friend, Gary. I introduced my dad and daughter and exchanged polite conversation. He mentioned he was now working as a security guard and had already caught several shoplifters, advising me to keep an eye on my belongings. We parted ways, and barely 2 minutes later, the lights flickered. A collective scream rose from the crowd as the lights came back on briefly, then plunged the store into darkness. Panic erupted. People started shouting, grabbing anything they could. I frantically searched for my dad and daughter, screaming their names amidst the chaos. People were pushing, running, and the store seemed to descend into madness. Suddenly, I was pushed to the floor by somebody running, and I banged my head. It took me a moment to get up as I was dazed, and someone else ran across my right hand. I screamed in pain and thought for sure my hand was broken. Suddenly, the security guard appeared and grabbed my arm, shouting, "Are you okay? I've got dad and little girl. You need to leave now. They're taking everything that isn't nailed down. Head to the storage rooms next to the Christmas display at the front." I raced to find my dad and daughter. The fear on their faces was heart-wrenching. I yelled for them to follow me. People were violently ripping out the cash registers and rushing out the doors with stolen goods. Shielding my dad and daughter, now perched on his lap, with my arm, I attempted to push our way out. The security guard reappeared with several other women and children, along with 2 other guards trying to evacuate people safely. They helped us navigate through the chaos. We burst through the exit into a scene straight out of an action movie. People were speeding off recklessly, stuffing stolen items into their back seats and trunks and fighting each other. I told my dad to head to the car as I sprinted to ours, a 2001 Honda Accord. With hazards flashing, I floored the gas. My dad and daughter climbed in, and we maneuvered through the jammed parking lot. I took a side entrance, driving the wrong way without a second thought. All I could say was, "What just happened?" I asked my dad how he managed to get to the front. He explained that they had been chatting with Gary, the security guard, when the lights went out, and he led them to the front. We were happy to get home in one piece that night. The next morning, before work, I went to the doctor's to get an X-ray on my hand. Luckily, nothing was broken, and he just bandaged me up and gave me a sling to keep my hand up for a couple of days. When I got to work, Gary's security guard was there. He was surprised to see my arm in a sling. He apologized. He explained what happened with the lights at the store. He said that a transformer had blown. I told him he did not need to apologize, and I thanked him profusely. He said that he was just glad that nobody was seriously hurt. It's funny how something so ordinary and so mundane like going to the store can turn into a nightmare. Sophia B. had been working at the Walmart on the edge of town for almost a year. The rhythmic beeping of the scanner and the hum of fluorescent lights had become the background music of her days. At 16, she was saving up for college, working the evening shift after school. The job was monotonous but safe. It was a rainy Tuesday in March when Sophia first noticed the man. He was tall, with graying hair that was balding at the front. He wore the same denim jacket every time he came in, which was often. At first, Sophia thought nothing of it. Customers had their routines, and Walmart was a place for routines. But the man, who seemed to be in his late 40s, started coming every day. His visits grew longer, his interactions with Sophia more persistent. He would linger in her checkout line, even when others were shorter. He never bought much, sometimes just a pack of gum or a soda, but his eyes never left her face. "Hi there, Sophia," he said one evening, his voice smooth but with an edge that made her skin crawl. He had read her name off her badge, of course. "How's your night going?" "Fine, thank you," Sophia replied, forcing a polite smile. "Do you need a bag for this?" He chuckled. "No bag, thanks. I'll see you tomorrow, Sophia." As the days turned into weeks, the man's behavior became more intrusive. He started commenting on her appearance, noting if she had changed her hairstyle or worn a different shade of lipstick. His remarks were always just on the edge of inappropriate, which was deeply unsettling to her. Sophia began to dread her shifts. She confided in her best friend Liv, who suggested she talk to their manager. Mr. Johnson, the store manager, was sympathetic, but could only do so much without concrete evidence of harassment. "Just keep an eye on him and let me know if he does anything out of line," he advised. The man's presence cast a shadow over Sophia's life. She started looking over her shoulder constantly, feeling his gaze even when he wasn't there. Her grades slipped, and her cheerful demeanor faded. Her parents noticed but attributed it to teenage mood swings and the pressures of school. In mid-May, as the store was closing, Sophia noticed the man standing by the exit, his eyes fixed on her. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to remain calm. She quickly finished her tasks and asked a co-worker, Matt, to walk her to her car. Matt was a tall, burly guy from her history class, always willing to help. "Everything okay, Soph?" Matt asked as they stepped into the parking lot. "Just that guy. He creeps me out." Matt nodded, his expression darkening. "I'll stick around until you drive off." That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the man's behavior in her mind, each encounter feeling more sinister in retrospect. The next day, she decided to take a different approach. She began documenting every interaction with the man, writing down dates, times, and details. She hoped this would help her build a case if things escalated. June brought sweltering heat and longer days. The man continued his visits, and he was becoming bolder. He started showing up at different times, catching her off guard. Once he even followed her to the break room, pretending to look for an item in the adjacent aisle. That same evening, he followed her halfway home. She lost him by driving off as the lights turned red in an intersection. The next day, she approached Mr. Johnson again, this time with her notes. "He's following me around the store, and he even tried to follow me home. I'm really scared." Mr. Johnson read through her notes, his expression grave. "I am sorry, Sophia. I'll call the cops. We can't let this continue." The police arrived and took Sophia's statement. They assured her they would investigate and advised her to be cautious. Mr. Johnson arranged for other employees to escort her to her car each night. A day later, the man came in again. This time, 2 police officers were waiting. They watched as he approached Sophia's checkout line. His face twisted in confusion when he saw them, but he didn't stop. "Excuse me, sir," one of the officers said. "We need to speak with you." The man tried to run, but the officers were quicker. They apprehended him and escorted him out of the store. Sophia watched, her hands shaking. The ordeal was finally over. The police later informed her that the man had a history of stalking and harassment. With the man gone, Sophia slowly began to reclaim her life. The Walmart still hummed with the same fluorescent lights and beeping scanners, but it felt safer now. If you would like to hear more stories and support this channel, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.